December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
We interrupt this broadcast, bringing this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbeville. Dr. Jeff Huffman is also Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Huffman and is a somewhat new-to-town urologist at the College Station Medical Center. His story is about as unique as they come because at age 51, after the attacks of September 11, 2001, that's when Dr. Huffman heard President Bush speak to Congress and the country and tell them that this war effort in Iraq would take the help of all Americans. So it was then that Dr. Huffman knew the president was speaking to him. He also knew there was a critical shortage of surgeons in the war zone. So he closed his practice and his tenured professorship at Southern Cal, where he'd been for 21 years. He got commissioned for the first time into the military, and in 2007 was sent to the American Military Hospital in Balad, about 45 miles north of Baghdad. That was a 5-month tour during the surge. In 2009, he returned for a 3-month tour. Dr. Huffman fixed people, American military, Iraqi military, civilians, and yes, even the enemy, Al-Qaeda. That's just part of his amazing story. Recently, Dr. Huffman was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal by the President of the United States. Welcome, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Jeff Huffman, to Veterans of the Valley. Honored to meet you and an honor to have you here,
Well, thanks,
Jeff.
Tom.
Thank you. It's
Appreciate
great
you
to
having
have
me
you
here.
You grew up in Dixon, Illinois, which has its own fame because of a fellow named Ronald Reagan. That was his childhood home, and that's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, it's a very special, real special place, and especially because of President Reagan having some time in that town also, and having a chance to meet him was one of the more special days of my life.
Right. You said your mother was a docent at the childhood home, sort of showed people around and all that. So she got to meet him on quite a few occasions.
Right, and I had a chance to meet him in his Century City office after he left the president's office. So it was very special. You
got interested in medicine by working one summer in your high school days at a hospital, and you thought this is a pretty good thing, making people well and fixing people. So you decided to go into the medical profession. Went to the University of Indiana, you're a Hoosier, and then to Loyola in Chicago for med school, worked in Peoria, University of Chicago, New York at Sloan Kettering, and then to California, where eventually you started a 21-year career at the University of Southern California. I wanted to fast forward to there because, like we said in the open, tell us what happened after 9/11 when you heard that speech from President Bush and how it sort of led you to make a radical change in your life and your family's life.
Well, I think my story is probably not that unique, but because I've run into a lot of healthcare providers over the years in Iraq and around the military, nurses, doctors, other providers who have a similar story. But our children were out of the house; they're older, and I heard the call of the president, and then almost the same time found out that there was this critical need of surgeons in the military, and looked into the possibility of getting the commission, even though I was really old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 51 is old for just getting into the military, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had no prior military experience at all, unlike most of the other folks that I was working around. But the Air Force was really good to me, and I was always be happy that I made that decision.
Right. It took you about 3 years, I think you said, to get the commission. Because of your age, it took a little bit longer, but you had done a lot of trauma work in California at your post there at Southern Cal. So you sort of were able to hit the ground running as far as what you were going to be doing.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to receive a lot of excellent training, and the Air Force supplemented that, and all throughout my career I've been around some really standout physicians to work with, so I've been very fortunate.
I thought it was interesting, you told me that you go from civilian into the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel. People might have raised their eyebrows at that, but the Army sort of has a policy to give you credit for the training that you'd had the previous 18 years.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at the time. They gave me credit for 18 years, actually,
right.
Board certified urologist, and they said, well, we didn't have to pay for any of that going along, so we're going to give you credit. And because at first you didn't want to accept that advanced rank, having never been in the military, but said, no, you got to do that, and it's important to take that role. So I did.
Indeed. 2007, you had been commissioned in 2005, training for a couple of years, and in 2007 you were deployed to Iraq to serve about 5 months, a little over 5 months there. Talk about that deployment, because it was part of the surge, and this was very intense work, but work that, like you told me, that you loved.
Yeah, it was pushing the envelope for me, but the thing that's unique about the providers there is you develop a camaraderie and a team approach really quickly, and we had a group of surgeons and physicians and nurses that really got together really fast to work as a team, and you know, the sooner we did that, the better, because we became busy very quickly in Balad.
Yeah, talk about Balad. Balad is I think you said is one of the largest military medical bases, medical hospitals in Iraq.
Balad is unbelievable, and it's the hub of a healthcare network in Iraq where the spokes go out from the hub to all the forward operating bases and the combat surgical hospital, the CASH units. So all our injured personnel are taken by chopper or fixed wing aircraft into Balad, evaluated, and then put on the C-17s to be taken to Germany. Mm-hmm. So we would see the injuries from the forward operating bases, evaluate them, and then we'd also see some direct injuries from the areas around Balad. It started off as a tent hospital, and it looked just like a MASH scene when I got there, and it was very similar to MASH with a pad and the choppers that come in and the personnel. And while we were there in 2007, we did transfer to a fixed facility, so we got rid of the hospital facility into a fixed facility. But it was very much like MASH when you first got there.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier and said that you know, the viewers can sort of get an idea because of the popular TV show. It was very, very similar to what you saw there. Not the booze parties that they had, so there was a little Hollywood that they threw in. But as far as the procedure, the rooms, the medical, the surgery, the people all working together, that was a very realistically, and obviously the technical people that worked on that show really knew what they were doing.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, you have to do, because of all the bad things you see all the time.
Right.
You end up having a lot of antics and playing jokes on each other and having a good time the best you can in a war zone. You know, there's nothing fun about it, but you do try to get to know each other and have fun together, and that worked out very well. So you just try to make the most out of a very difficult situation.
I know that a lot of it is sensitive, a lot of it is graphic, even to explain the type of wounds that you saw, but you saw the worst of the worst, and people just really don't realize the type of, we hear about the deaths, we hear about the people who die and the families that are left behind, but I don't think we hear near enough about the survivors and how some of them have to survive with mortal wounds that last all their lives. And these are a lot of the people that you saw quickly fixed as well as best you could and said goodbye to.
Yeah, the survival rate of the folks that made it to the facility was 98%, and I think it still is in that neighborhood, 98%. So if they could make it to the facility, they had a 98% chance of surviving, which is unbelievable, given the types of injuries that we saw and the volume of injuries that we saw. In 2007, our service members would rapidly be evaluated and treated, resuscitated, and ongoing to Germany and then back home within a very short period of time. So it was hard for us to get to know anybody to any great extent. We got to see some people, however, and I do have some people I stay in contact with that were treated there, so it's very rewarding.
Burns, penetration wounds, I mean, like I said, the worst of the worst is what you said.
It's very much like MASH in that regard. I think the burns they're all bad. Yes. But these IED wounds are just horrible because they fill these improvised explosive devices with all sorts of bad things, you know, nuts and bolts, nails, door hinges, you name it's in there. And they would, we called them shark bites because as they hit the body, they basically just take out chunks of tissue. Mm-hmm. And so you would see a patient with these chunks of tissue missing that you had to go in and clean up and stop the bleeding and treat. So the burns would probably be the worst.
Right.
I think our personnel with burns around the country and in Germany just do a great job.
Right.
Getting folks on the aircraft to Germany and to hospital here, whether it's in Baltimore or San Antonio, to be treated. Just remarkable.
Right, certainly, yeah. BAMC in San Antonio is probably one of the most famous as far as burn units.
And we would be in direct contact, I didn't know this going over, but we'd be in direct contact with the folks at BAMC. As we had a burn patient coming in the ER, we would open up the lines of communication right away.
Right.
And we would start consulting with the folks. So along the different changes in the echelon of care, they would be familiar with what was coming and what they were expecting. So it was really good communication. I was impressed by that.
When I grew up in San Antonio, it was known by its full name, Brooke Army Medical Center, but BAMC came along later on, so I want to give it its full name. You told a couple of stories, one about observing, you're in a reserve unit and you serve in Riverside, California, in a reserve unit still. You told one story about a briefing at that reserve unit at Riverside.
Yeah, I'm not a military guy by history or anything, so all this was pretty new to me, and I have to thank Colonel Sanchez and Weisenberger and McGregor there for allowing me to do all this. But before my first tour to Iraq, you get an intel briefing.
Right.
And so it's kind of smoke and mirrors a little bit. It's behind closed doors and dark room with a TV screen, and pilots were there. There's only half a dozen of us, and they showed a plot of the base, Balad Air Base, or the Army called it Anaconda, and they had about a dozen red flags on the map, and said, "You guys know what this is?" And I said, "I don't know what that is." He said, "Well, this is where 12 rockets have hit in the last 12 hours." And they said, "Well, not only that, but did you know they called this base Mortaritaville?" And so I said, "No, I didn't know that either." So it was pretty active indirect fire attacks on the base. It was a real thing.
You did your second tour in 2009, but I want to go back to some numbers that you told me on that first tour during the surge. And you said that your unit did just about 2,800 procedures, and of those, you think your number was around 300?
Yes. It's not glamorous surgery at all.
Right.
There's probably 8 of us, I think. It's one of the secrets to success, I think, in the war zone was the standardization of how we approached the surgical procedures. Very standardized, doing the same thing, the same techniques, and a lot of it was just basic wound care and caring for injured folks. It was very serious injuries though too, but the bulk of it was just wound care and taking care of these IED wounds, which were the vast majority of the injuries.
You told me, and I want you to sort of just take it from here, the people that you treated and who you treated there. Tell me what you told me this morning.
Yeah, I think that was a surprise. You're going to treat service members. That's what you're there for. That's why you join. And I think in 07 we probably maybe 40% or maybe 50%, I don't recall the exact numbers, were our service members and coalition troops. But then another 40 or so percent were Iraqi civilians, police, and military. But we also treated the bad guys, and that was kind of a new thing. And we sat down before, when we first got there and talked about treating the bad guys. You're treating the guy that may have just killed a couple of our people. And you're supposed to save his life. And that was a little bit, you had to wrestle with that just a little bit, but when you found out that taking care of this guy and making sure he could stay around to give some information that may save lives in the future, and that's how you reconcile that.
Exactly.
But I remember all of us, we would try to communicate with the patients as best we could. That we're trained that way, and I remember one Al-Qaeda guy, and he was hardcore, and he didn't want to be alive. He wanted to be dead, and no doubt about it. He had a bad leg injury, and I was gonna have to take off his leg the rest of the way. And so through our translator, Dr. Jamal, who was an Iraqi physician and now an American, we said, well, make sure he knows what I'm gonna do. And Dr. Jamal would tell him, and the patient, who's the Al-Qaeda, would talk back to Dr. Jamal, and then Dr. Jamal would tell me, he said, he doesn't want you to do that surgery. He wants you to let him die. And he says, in the name of Allah. You know, so I would say to Dr. Jamal, to the patient actually, and he would translate. And I said, well, in the name of my God and my supervisors and me, we're going to save your life. You know, that's who we are. And then Dr. Jamal would translate that again, and patient would say back to him, and there'd be a lot of interchange. And I'd say, well, what did he say? And he said, well, you don't want to hear what he said. And I said, no, I want to hear. He said, no, you don't want to hear. And I said, well, okay. He said, if you save my life, tell the doctor that if I'm alive, I'm going to come and get him. I'm going to make sure he doesn't live either.
Yes.
If you save my life, I'll make sure he'll come and kill me, basically. So that was a little different.
That's pretty eye-opening to hear that, and then these put on the scrubs and go to work, and
yeah. So
I'm glad he didn't find you.
Yeah, I'm not an intel person or anything, but there is a hardcore group of people that just hate us.
Right.
And just because we're Americans.
Right.
And
that's hardcore Al-Qaeda.
That's hardcore.
Now you also have the thugs that you said.
To me they're like an LA gangster or something. Right. I saw plenty of that in LAC USC Med Center. Where these guys would maybe be paid $500 to go shoot at Americans for 2 weeks. And maybe the next 2 weeks they'd be paid by our people to get some information on it. But if they got injured, they wanted us to do all we could to save them.
Right.
So it was a different breed.
Right.
Very interesting.
Right. They were hurting. Let's go to some pictures. You've got some great photographs that were taken, and as we look at it, sort of comment briefly on, we have the date there of when this was, so go ahead.
Well, this is in the 10 hospital during the surge, and I'm working with Matt Senna, who's a wonderful surgeon up in Davis, California. And you can see that little tin can that we operate in, and they actually can have 2 surgeries going on at the same time. And we're doing a neck dissection on somebody who had a penetrating wound to the neck.
Okay.
The 10 hospital was unbelievable. This is the new facility, which opened in August of '07, and this is at that time the Air Force Surgeon General, General Rodebush, visited with us. And at the end of the day, we had I think we had 19 or 20 patients come through, and he stayed and watched us take care of this mass casualty drill. And this was at 2 or 3 in the morning as we were finishing up that day. And he was a real special friend, and it was nice of these folks when they came by to visit. This is another real special. You meet a lot of good people. John Martin is a neurosurgeon who was shot during the tour in '07, and he was awarded a Purple Heart in a very moving ceremony. It was actually the anniversary, August 7th, of when George Washington gave out the first Purple Heart. So it was a very special day for John and for us to honor him.
Wow.
We had our swamp without the alcohol. So after we're done for the day and you're resting, we'd have some water and some fake beer. They'd have the non-alcoholic beer, and we'd go smoke cigars on the roof of the hospital, and waiting for the choppers to come in, which you could hear in the background. So these are the surgeons and staff members, and Dr. Eppinger is second from the left. There is the trauma czar. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon down at Wilford Hall, real special guy.
Right.
And Mike Eppinger, and then John Martin, the guy that got Purple Heart, was also there. Again, just like MASH, the chopper lands on the pad, and our folks go out and pick up the patient in the gurney and take them into the hospital. Very similar. The things you don't realize, for me it was a surprise, probably shouldn't have been, the noise. Unbelievable noise all the time between the jets and the choppers. And then the fact that most of our operations were at night, so most of our work was at night too. So that made sense when you think of it.
You can almost hear Radar O'Reilly, saying, incoming wounded when you look at something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
And this was a special time when I came home to Ontario Airport near the base there at Riverside, and that's my wife Terry, and you really appreciate where you're from when you set foot on American soil again. It's a very special time, and the welcoming we got at BWI in Baltimore was also very special.
Great.
And then again, Dr. Senna taking a look up here. It's all about the people. John Beanie is on the left there. We're doing the surgery at the new hospital. John is a trauma surgeon down at Wilford Hall too, and another real special surgeon.
Right. How many nurses? I mean, is full complement of nurses?
Yeah, we had an ICU, a ward, and the ORs, and I think we probably had 40 nurses roughly, right. And real special group. They worked 6 days a week and sometimes 7.
They both civilian and military, or are they?
Reservists and military. Yeah, a lot of reservists over there in 07 and 09.
Right.
Again, John Beanie, and we had a lot. That's a nurse anesthetist there.
Right.
I think we had 8 nurse anesthetists and 2 or 3 anesthesiologists in our group. And then this is Jason, and Jason is a special forces guy. They came by they would come by and spend about 4 weeks with us to learn basic surgical skills, because as they go out and do their special operations, these guys would have to provide their own first aid in the field. And so Jason was a special friend, and these guys are unbelievably talented. I mean, we're so lucky to have them on our side. These guys are really great. This is I call it my turtle picture. During an alarm red, at that time anyway, you had to put your helmet and your body armor on. And just about this time, as they snapped a picture, there was another rocket attack, and I was getting ready to hit the ground. So it looks like I'm ducking into my shell there, but just kind of gives a feel for what goes on there. If you're operating on a patient, you continue to operate. Mm-hmm. And so I think there were 5 or 6 times where we were operating during alarm red. Mm-hmm. And that's the highest level of alarm, where you have a organized attack, 3 or more rocket attacks at one time.
You got to meet General Petraeus.
Oh yeah.
At one time.
You get these DVs that come by quite a bit, and they're usually at night when the choppers fly, which is our advantage. So somebody said, well, clean off your desk. We got a DV coming by and a party. And I said, fine. And then I get all that done. I look up and I see those stars. And I said, I know that guy. That's General Petraeus.
Yeah.
So here we are at midnight, and he's walking through. And he sat down and talked to the docs. And it was very special. I mean, he had something to say to us, wanted to make sure we had everything we needed. It was very special to me because it happened to be June 6th.
Right.
And I had just watched the movie Ike on a DVD.
Right.
And we were talking about that, and it was a real special day, and to have him be there meant a lot to me and to all the folks that he met.
You mentioned that you had not had any military experience before 2005 when you were commissioned, but your father served on the USS Alabama in the Pacific in World War II. And your father-in-law was at Pearl Harbor on the Arizona. Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have that type of upbringing. All my uncles were in the Navy, so right. It's in some ways I had that need to satisfy that military service too, growing up.
Right.
And my father actually ended up retiring down near Mobile, where the Alabama is in dry dock.
Right.
So we enjoyed going down
I've been there
to visit that.
Went there for a baseball tournament about 3 or 4 years ago. That was the first thing I did, was tour the Alabama.
Yeah, it's a nice part of the country down there. So.
Yeah, it really is. Well, you got to be very, very proud of that. You after your second tour, we haven't talked much about that. We've got about 5 more minutes. It was a 3-month tour in 2009. Quite a bit different. This was not during the surge. Yeah. This is when things were wrapping up as far as the effort in Iraq, of course, but it was a marked difference when you went back for those 3 months.
Yes, I got a call from the Surgeon General's office that they wanted to have a urologist, and they asked me because I also had the general surgery training and could do both those jobs, and it was very nice to go over. Several of my buddies were going back. So it's really hard to say no when you have that type of calling.
Right.
My buddy Tracy Jones, who's unbelievably talented vascular surgeon and C-130 pilot down at Lackland and Wilford Hall, he was going back. It was very rewarding though, because we saw that the tempo had decreased drastically. Mm-hmm. And so you saw a big change over that 2 years. And I've reported that to a lot of parents and other folks that have been there earlier on, and they like to hear that when we came back in 2009 that things were getting better. The other thing is we got to react with some of the Iraqi folks, which we didn't before because the base was off limits at that earlier time.
Right. You came back, you practiced 4 years in Sulphur Springs, Texas, and then came to College Station, which was a little bit closer to Austin where your kids were. And so you came here, and you've been here for about 6 months, and also because of the robotic surgery that I know that you're very into. You had that at Southern Cal, you had here, did not have it at Sulphur Springs. So talk a little bit about your practice now. 6 months here, you're a urologist, and talk about your practice here now.
I need to thank my associate John Cochran for allowing me to come in and share his office and work with him. He's been an absolute delight to work with. Tom Jackson, who allowed me to come here and has the confidence in me to bring me here, and I really share his vision for healthcare in this community, and I really thank all the medical community for their support too. I started doing the minimally invasive surgery a number of years ago, and then robotic surgery at USC back in '06, and then started doing it again when I came here in December.
Right.
So we take care of the prostate cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer. I like to do kidney stones, work on incontinence, and I see adult and pediatric patients. And the other thing I enjoy is I go to Brenham 2 days a week, and also to Navasota 1 day a week. So I get to see the surrounding areas and interact with the folks and the medical providers down in those clinics too.
You've had a blessed life, and you're being able to serve in your profession and help people. Congratulations, the Meritorious Service Medal that you were awarded. It is designed for non-combat. Of course, they look at those mortar shells in there, and you might dispute whether it was non-combat or not. But congratulations on the award from the president.
Well, thank you very much. There's so many other folks that do such good work, and I'm really humbled by that. And it's not something I'd asked for, but I certainly accept it on behalf of all the other providers and my family and all. So I really appreciate you acknowledging that.
I want to rewind because I put down here on my notes real quick. The unit you were assigned to at Balad, the 332nd, was actually the original Tuskegee Airmen,
oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the home unit is the original Tuskegee Airmen unit, the 332nd. And, we were called the Red Tail Medics. Yeah. And that goes back to World War II, where the Tuskegee Airmen would provide fighter support for the bombers over Germany.
Right.
And they painted the tails on their aircraft red, so the bomber pilots would know that the Red Tail pilots were there supporting them and protecting them. And we actually had some of those pilots come to Balad and visit while we were there. So it was very special.
The movie Tuskegee Airmen is one of my favorite movies of World War II, as a matter of fact. Thank you for visiting with us. The time goes by too fast, and your service for your country, and we're glad to have you here.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Tom.
Dr. Jeff Huffman heard the call to serve from the President of the United States, and instead of just hearing it, he acted on it. So he was there, serving. Lives were saved. I can't think of a higher calling of service. We salute Dr. Huffman and all veterans. I'm Tom Turbeville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.